Welcome back to the Youth In podcast. I'm your host, Alex Smith, and I'm joined here today by Rishi Kumar, a twice elected councilman of Saratoga, California. Mr. Kumar has been an executive of the California Democratic Party since 2013 and has experience as a high-tech executive for companies such as Cisco and IBM. Rishi, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. And I'm also joined here today by my co-host, Andre Benoit.
And thank you for having me. I do truly appreciate the opportunity. And if it's okay with everyone, I'd like to begin with education. Now, many of us identify that America's education system is starting to falter. The majority of the population feels a very similar way. Now, you've talked about improving the K through 12 system and expanding STEM education, as well as trade schools. Now, can you talk to us about how you plan on doing that?
Yes, so education is a huge component of my charter, and there are a couple areas. And if you look at me as coming into the country for graduate school on the East Coast, the University of Connecticut, mechanical engineering, all the opportunities that came about was because of education. So that's definitely a key area of focus. For example, I was on the California Department of Education Computer Science Strategic Implementation Panel. And what we have done is we have defined a K-12 curriculum for California, which is a computer science curriculum. So every public school child in the state of California starting 2022 will be studying some facet of computer science. So STEM is a very, very important component of what I would like to do, because we live here in Silicon Valley and all the success we have as the 19th largest economy is because of STEM and the innovation economy that we have here. So what is my plan? So my plan stems around creating vocational education, which is completely lacking right now. When you look at, for example, California, the education system we have here, it is 46th in the United States, which is like really sad. California gets a lot of tax dollars, and I believe the education system could be bolstered. So my attempt would be to see how America's system can be bolstered, but also to create opportunities which line up with jobs. So let's give you two examples, right? So when you look at the universities, we have lots of majors in different universities, public funded programs, right? But many of these programs don't end up creating jobs. So for example, last year, we had a student from UCLA who had gone through a 4-year program at UCLA. She was very, very good, had great communication skills, an amazing persona, but she did not find a job when she graduated because the major that she had chosen did not have a direct path into a job. So I think we need to create an America where many of these programs have a direct pipeline into jobs. And if there are no jobs for specific majors, let's make sure we inform the students about it, right? Extremely important. Now, secondly, when you look at an economy like Silicon Valley, we have a tech economy, we have an economy that is geared around startups. What if we created vocational education that provides a pathway? You finish your diploma and you can find a job as a social media consultant, as a social media manager. Every company, small or big, needs social media because that's such a key component of success in the world of business. So we can create these programs to help ensure that we can create jobs that line up with the local economy, not just here, but in every part of the United States. So I'll be rolling out legislations and policies that will help towards creating a future for every youth in America.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Now, sticking with education, obviously COVID has been a real weight on the education system. How would you handle distance learning, and would you reopen schools?
So, I think when you look at, we have written a policy paper on the pandemic, and we have touched upon education. Now, education is in a little bit of a jeopardy because many of the public schools were not ready to conduct the online education. And we believe that it should be a simple switch. So the private schools, for example, I see a private school here, and they took a break for a day in March of last year. And the day after, they started their online education without skipping a beat. So it was just the same, the curriculum was all defined. You obviously had classes, and the students, instead of sitting in school, they were actually sitting at home. You got a breather to go and get your lunch or coffee or whatever else, but you had to, it was a very well-structured program. The public schools were suffering. So there needs to be an investment in infrastructure for for schools across America, so that we are creating this opportunity for students to go and study online. And the schools that are the most disadvantaged are the ones that are in disadvantaged districts with not so much of a property tax or tax pipeline that helps them fund these types of initiatives. So it's extremely important that our government, in the federal government, is out there investing to ensure that schools will get the infrastructure they need to survive the world of pandemic. I don't believe we have really done that. We have tried to address that with the first stimulus package, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. Now, secondly, with online learning, I think I've heard lots of complaints because the parents are like really getting quite stressed out with trying to manage a child and then also going through their own job, conference calls. The child is playing games, not really turning on the video. So the online education has really suffered. And so to some extent, we also need to understand how we will provide the basic framework of what it takes to go through our online education, not just for the teachers, but also for the students. And we have to explain them what is involved and the risks involved, because if students are not going to pay attention, you're not going to learn. And it's very difficult for a teacher who's sitting somewhere else to really monitor every student. So those are types of challenges we have. But the third component of this is when it comes to, they say it's the new normal. I truly don't believe that, because in within a few months, if we go out aggressively vaccinating what President Biden is talking about, we will get back to a normal world, let's say by September. And at that point, people say, oh, we are sick and tired of Zoom meetings, right? So we'll get back to a normal world because man thrives upon social interaction, face-to-face interaction. But this has defined an expectation amongst parents upon students with our school districts to create an infrastructure. And we have to make sure that we are defining a robust policy for every school so that they, in the next year or 2 years, they have created a system which will help ensure that in the next pandemic happens, everybody's ready. Flip a button and you're good to go. So those are some ideas we have.
And that's really an interesting take. We have, there's within the Democratic Party, which obviously you're part of, and also within the Republican Party, we're seeing kind of a divide between people who want to reopen and roll out those vaccinations and stop the distance learning. And then there's people who, want to keep it going and see the long-term effects of the vaccine. And you mentioned Biden, and Biden obviously is wanting to, he mentioned a lockdown, at least in some states, for I think 2 weeks, a mandatory lockdown of everything other than like the necessities. And many people are starting to post online about how they're starting to regret voting for Biden. The sentiment is kind of growing amidst his actions in the Middle East. What is your opinion on Biden and on his actions in the Middle East?
Well, he just got elected. Let's give him some time. And, he basically had put together some very strong policy ideas on many of these challenges that were affecting America. And it's just like a week, barely a week, slightly more than a week. So I think we should give him some time, let him go out and try some of these things and see how it's going to impact and benefit people. Because at the end of the day, what we really want is to get back to an open economy. We want, people thrive upon people-to-people interaction. And the sooner we get there, there is a lot of let's say, people, the stress level has really gone up in a pandemic because people don't have any release. There's nothing going on, and people are sort of stuck at home. And so sooner and faster we can get to an open economy. I really like the fact that he's talking about 100 million vaccinations in 100 days. I still believe it's too short. We should likely vaccinate pretty much everybody in America. Now, like wartime, what we do is we get manufacturing plants to turn into manufacturing weapons, right? This is what we have done in wartime. So similarly, this is almost like that. We need vaccinations. We need them deployed faster. And when you look at California, we have failed miserably with that. We were in the bottom 40th state in terms of how we had deployed our vaccination, the program has not been very successful. But what I would do if I were President Biden was to ramp up the vaccination production, get everybody vaccinated within like 100 days. And that would be a true testament of leadership. I would love to see that.
And so kind of sticking with the questions of vaccination, there's a lot of people who are pro mandatory vaccinations. There are certain companies now that are saying, we're not mandated. If we don't mandate it, we're going to strongly recommend it and kind of push out the people who don't want to get those mandatory vaccinations. And we see that in areas where the vaccination is a good idea, like in school, the public teachers, hospice workers, people on the front lines battling COVID. Are you pro mandatory vaccinations, or do you think people should still have the choice to get vaccinated?
America is driven by culture. For example, many countries in the world said mandatory mask, right? I've seen videos where the police is standing there and they are monitoring pretty much anybody and everybody. And if they don't have a mask, you are in trouble. And the lockdown was pretty intense. I mean, they would literally catch everybody who was out on the street and they would get fined. Now, America, it's very, very hard because, we are a free country. We call it a free country. And it's very difficult to basically go out and impose certain sets of rules because, we are a lawsuit driven country. And when you try to do that, everybody sort of starts rebelling. And so it's not very easy in America. So the fact that we've never had mandatory masks, it tells me that to impose something like this, where everybody has to do it, it's extremely hard. So when you look at governance and creating policies, everybody wants to take the fastest and an easiest path to roll out these policies. So if you try to do mandatory vaccination, it's not going to work. So to some extent, I think what is realistic is to offer this option to everybody. And if they don't take that vaccination option, there's not a whole lot we can do about it. There is some talk about creating a system where if you have to fly, if you have to travel, then you have to show proof of vaccination. I think it's a tough sell. It's going to be difficult, but these are something that will have to be put together. Now, truly speaking, we haven't put together a policy on vaccination, but we had sort of talked about a very high level story, but this is the time where our team is actually putting together a vaccination policy, which will be on our website pretty soon.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Now, talking about COVID, sticking with that a little bit, as well as talking about some of the more broad issues that will last longer than COVID, specifically the economy. Now, it's no secret America has been struggling with debt and fiscal responsibility. We are increasing debt and economic issues, and COVID has only made the situation worse and more dire. What is your plan to balance economic rebound with the many social and economic policies supported by the left?
Essentially, it's very simple. It's extremely simple. We need to have an open economy because there are people suffering. When you look at, for example, tech, Silicon Valley is all about tech. The tech community is still thriving. There are job openings, there are recs that are out there waiting to be filled. So this community is thriving. But the ones, they are the ones who are like working in pizza shops or beauty salons, nail salons. They are the ones that have been impacted. So we need to get back to an open economy so that we make it equitable for every American, no matter what income tier they are in, to go out and make a livelihood, to make a living. And so the short answer is we need to go out and vaccinate people. We need to open up our economy as quickly as possible. And to some extent, I believe that if you look at the number of deaths we have had, 500,000. In fact, if you look at flus, people would tell me that, Rishi, about the COVID-19, here is the staggering stats. Very quickly, we'll be at 500,000 deaths in America. And how many died through the flu? It's about 50, 60,000 annually, right? So the number is pretty stark. This pandemic is for real. We have to treat it pretty seriously. We cannot take it casually. So the best way to do it is to get everybody vaccinated and open up the economy as quickly as possible, because then what it does is it creates happiness. When people are out there, they are going to shows, music events, they have a weekend, they have a nightlife, they are meeting their friends and neighbors, there is, life is back to normal. This is really what we need to do as quickly as possible. This is something that America or the world had never ever experienced in our lifetime. And unfortunately, we have the luck of the draw where every 100 years, a specific group of population has to deal with the pandemic. Seems like here we are dealing with it, right? But what we have to do is we have to figure out a way to get out of it as quickly as possible. And we have a pathway. We have a clear pathway, and that's why I keep talking about ramping up vaccination. Let's vaccinate everybody in America in the next 100 days and get the economy open up as quickly as possible.
All right, I appreciate that. And now I would like to talk a little bit more past COVID, a few years down the line. Can you talk to us about what your plans are? I know you've somewhat discussed, 2022, but long term, where do you see yourself?
Yep, there are two big challenges. As a mechanical engineer, as a Silicon Valley executive, I always believe that there are problems out there that need to be solved. And that's the only reason why I jumped into politics. There are two big problems. One is there is a mass exodus happening from California. People are leaving and people are going to Texas. People are moving to Florida. There are 70 people in California that contribute 90% of the taxes. And many of them are starting to leave now. And that's a big problem because our tax resources would get drained. Companies are leaving. HP is leaving. Palantir is leaving. Elon Musk left. He's moving to a different state. I mean, everybody's leaving California. So that's a number one challenge, because if that continues to happen, we will lose our investment dollars that fund the Silicon Valley startup. And in fact, startups would not happen here. And the doom and gloom scenario is Detroit. It went from the most industrious city of the world down to, let's call it the dumps, where it was just a ghost town. We don't want Silicon Valley to become that. So that's my number one priority, to see how we can retain jobs, how we can retain people, and how we can grow a bigger, better economy. Silicon Valley is the 19th largest economy in the United States. Can we make it the 10th largest or the 5th largest economy? There's an opportunity. How do we do that? That brings me to part B of my focus area. There is a flight, like I said, when you look at people leaving, if you look at 2017, we had a net 2016, we had a net 24,000 people coming into the Bay Area, the heart of Silicon Valley, and is like 9 different counties. And now 2 years later, we have gone down to a net 2,000 people leaving Silicon Valley. So we are shrinking in population, and we have to figure out a way to keep it, but there are quality of life issues with that. Housing is super expensive. So we talk about building more and more housing, but there is no plan, there is no urban plan that addresses the quality of life needs, that addresses traffic. So I talk about building a mega Silicon Valley vision based upon high-speed transportation, not the bullet train, but something new, something cutting-edge transportation technology, like a tunnel-based system, because it's very difficult to put railroad, tunnel-based system that is zipping and connecting cities like Stockton to San Jose would be down to 15 minutes. Now, this is a problem that exists in New York City, in Chicago, in LA, the Washington, DC area. Traffic has become a big problem and people are leaving. So how do you fix that? If you reduce the commute time into other far-flung cities, then what you have done is you have created housing opportunities in those cities, but also jobs, because when the population shifts to these other cities that do not have a density problem, then you will also create jobs, because when Stockton, there are young engineers who will live in Stockton and travel to Silicon Valley. When they do a startup, they will actually do it right in Stockton. And this is how you can spread the wealth. You can grow a bigger, better economy. I call it a mega Silicon Valley vision, which is what we bring to the table. But this can be applied, like I said, to every city across America. It's going to be a huge focus. I think we need to invest in infrastructure. And these are my 2 focus areas in my first 2 years. Obviously, the pandemic is extremely important. And then after the pandemic, we look at the exodus from Silicon Valley and how we can solve the transportation challenge that we have here, quality of life.
Right. Yeah. And obviously, as you mentioned, a lot of people are leaving California. That's for the transportation, the high cost of living. A lot of people don't like the pay versus the cost of living. And they're kind of getting sick of like San Francisco and its issues LA and its issues. But one reason a lot of people think people are leaving California is kind of that they're sick of the Democratic Party and kind of Gavin Newsom. And there's a sort of rising hatred and anger against the somewhat two-party restrictive system in America. And we're starting to see people get sick of that Republican-Democrat dichotomy and move to more third-party ideologies. You've said on your website that not all Democrats are the same. And that's arguably more true than ever now as we see people from Biden all the way to Bernie and AOC. Do you think a third party could rise, if not in America, then in California in the next few years?
Well, the short answer is it's already happening. President Trump is talking about a patriot party, and they'll come up with a different ideology. They'll when you look at the whole, are we in the middle, left, right? It's going to figure out something. And I think when you look at California, it's dominated by Democrats. And I always believe in checks and balances. The checks and balances are missing in the system in California. And when you look at something like affirmative action, Prop 16 was on the ballot, and this was essentially the legislators, the lower house and the upper house, our assembly and the Senate, that decided they wanted to put it on the ballot and bring affirmative action back. The people rejected it big time. So to some extent, when you don't have the checks and balances, the policymakers can exert their influence in sometimes in a very untoward manner, which is sort of not the will of the people. And that's why checks and balances are very, very important to have. And the Republican Party seemingly does not have much say in the state of California, except in certain pockets. And then when you look at 2018, I believe 6 congressional districts flipped from red to blue, and some of them have flipped back to red. But that's the nature of what's going on in California. When one party becomes very strong, then it creates some issues there. So 2 parties make sense. And if you have a third party, I think there is room for a third party.
You mentioned there's districts flipping both sides. And when you look at a lot of people who talk and analyze about the political opinions in California, they mention how California was once very Republican and it's flipped. It's kind of the pendulum of the grandfather clock has kind of swung. Do you think California could flip red anytime soon? We're kind of seeing that pendulum swing back towards the red side.
If people keep leaving, then yes, it will turn red for all you know, right? But I kind of don't see that in the near future. And what's happening is when people from California are leaving to Texas is sort of becoming a little bit more blue, or Florida or Washington is already pretty blue. So I think that's really what is going on. I think California turning blue, I'm not so sure of that. Yes, it might happen in a couple of decades, but not in the near term.
And so for our last question, we wanted to touch on kind of the semi-recent and long-lasting kind of accusations that have been targeted towards your political campaign. There have been multiple allegations that you have ties to the BJP, a well-known kind of, a lot of people will say right-wing, but just conservative more so. They're a lot more Hindu nationalist, kind of anti-Muslim party in India. You've been seen meeting with Modi, the Prime Minister of India, and a well-known BJP member. You defended yourself saying, quote, "It was the first time ever I had conversed with a world leader who I seek to emulate my governance of the city council," unquote. Since then, you've been seen at multiple of BJP rallies, or BJP rallies for the listeners that occur overseas. Many people don't understand why a self-proclaimed progressive would attend these sort of events. How do you respond to these allegations?
Yeah, so this has been, it's a question I've gotten a few times over the last couple of years. And it's essentially completely misplaced attacks on me. And you look at OFMI, the organization that has leveled these accusations, they do not have a stellar reputation. They have attacked President Obama. They have attacked pretty much every Indian American leader who has decided to step up and run for office. And, it's really clearly unfounded. I mean, they have called me a mole of the BJP. I mean, how can I be a mole of the BJP? I came in for my graduate school decades ago, and when BJP was just a party that was getting started. So these accusations are unfounded, completely unfounded. And when you look at me attending a rally or a meeting, people invited me for a meeting and I would show up. I'm getting a chance to meet with the Prime Minister of India. I would meet him as a congressman if I had a chance. Yes, why would I refuse a meeting? It doesn't mean that I completely endorse and support the person. I'm there as an elected leader of my community, invited to meet with the Prime Minister. Yes. And in fact, what I told him was some of the things he has done, like demonetization in India, that has actually cleared up all the black money. He's got an approach of getting things done. And I have a very similar approach that led me to win with the most votes in city history in my city. So that's the congruency that we have, right? Now, attending a meeting, when people invite me to a meeting, friends of mine invite me to a meeting, I will show up there. I'll be sitting down. It doesn't mean that I support what's going on there. I'm just there to meet some of these friends and have conversations about politics, right? I mean, and sometimes I'm there to recruit new people to join my team to help me out with my run, right? So anyway, I think these acquisitions have been completely misplaced. And we, in fact, if you go to my website and search for BJP, you will write a pretty strong statement we have written up expressing our angst with these accusations that have come at us.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you. That was the last question on our list. Thank you again for joining us, Mr. Kumar or Rishi. We appreciate you giving your time today. We really
All right. It's a delight to talk to you. Great questions. And thank you so much for taking the time to reach out. All right. All the best to both of you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to continue to support us, you can do so by checking out our Instagram pages at YIP Institute and at Watch Verbum. You can also look at our website at www.yipinstitute.com. Make sure to follow our page as we upload weekly. Have a good day.